Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with part 2 of my December wrap-up. If you want to see the first part of my wrap-up, I will link that below, of course, and I will also put content warnings and links to other things that I mention in the description box. So the first book I'm going to talk about today is Wildflower Season by Michelle Major. This is considered like women's fiction, which I hate that phrase. It's so condescending, I feel like, but I feel like what that genre or category really is basically coming of age stories for adults, which often have a pretty strong romantic element, but it's also about like the character development of the protagonist and kind of like growing and changing and, you know, like healing or moving on from things. And a lot of I know a lot of people don't like those because they don't think there's enough of the romance and there's too much of the character stuff, but I like it. So anyway, this is my first Michelle Major book. This is the first book in a series, and we're following our main character Emma, who her marriage ended very badly. So she decides like, well, now's her chance to just completely start over. And I guess in like a prequel short story or something, we find out how this happens, but she basically ends up impulse buying this like property that is for sale. Like, she's visiting her brother in this small town and she just kind of falls in love with this little house or this inn, and she wants to get it back up and as like a venue for like having events. And she ends up crossing paths with this young woman who is getting married very soon, and her wedding like planning is just like a disaster. Like, things keep going wrong, people keep canceling on her, and so the two of them decide like, well, let's join forces. You know, this will be Emma's first big client, and it's also, of course, going to fix this woman's wedding. And she ends up running into this like contractor who he's helping do a lot of like the fix-up work on the house. His name is Cameron, and his wife actually died several years ago, so he's still grieving that. And so him and Emma both have, you know, like stuff in their past that they have to kind of like work through as they get to know each other and fall in love. And I ended up really liking this. I do want to mention I listened to this on audio. The narrator was Carly Robbins. I thought she did a good job. I really liked the progression of our main characters and of their relationship. It felt organic, and I don't feel like there was a lot of the back and forth that can kind of annoy me. Like in books, sometimes that can happen. It's like the author suddenly is like, oh wait, this is too early for them to have worked out this problem, so we're just going to backtrack. I feel like it was paced very well in terms of that. I also just enjoyed the characterization in general. I really loved the community. Like, that was probably my favorite part of this book, was just like the side characters and the town, and like seeing everyone come together for this wedding to like make it happen. I just thought that was very cool. I also ended up liking the romance more than I thought, especially because the like tropes are not usually things I enjoy, and also because the book does this thing that I personally don't like, and I know it's a pet peeve and not everybody doesn't like it, but when they like run into each other for the first few times, they're like constantly distracted by the other person's body and how like attractive they are in a way that just feels like, it always just feels like weird to me and kind of like boring, like a boring way to kind of start a relationship. But I ended up liking where the relationship went from there. And finally, I also really love just the business aspect of this. Like, I've heard people say that for Nora Roberts romances that she always has like some kind of business angle that gets quite a bit of page time, and that's one of the things people enjoy, is like her heroines specifically just being very competent and very good at their jobs, and I really like that here as well. So I gave Wildflower Season 4 stars, and I definitely think I would be interested in picking up more by this author. You'll notice that there's quite a few audiobooks this month, actually. I was doing a lot of listening while I was like, you know, knitting or like playing games or doing other things. Puzzles was another one. Next, I read Prequel, An American Fight Against Fascism by Rachel Maddow. This is a nonfiction book. I also listened to this one on audio, and I highly recommend that if that is an option for you, because Rachel Maddow narrates it herself and she's fantastic. Like, I just really enjoyed her narration. So as I said, this is a nonfiction book, and I think I heard about it for the first time when I saw Rachel Maddow on, I think it was Stephen Colbert's show, but I'm not sure. And she was in an interview and she was talking about this book and why she wrote it and why it's so important now for the current political climate of the US. And I was really interested in it, so I ended up buying it and I ended up listening to it. And I'm glad I have the physical copy as well to look up specifics. And yeah, this is fantastic. So this is specifically set in the lead up and the duration of World War II in the US. And it's looking at the like frightening amount of support that the US had for Hitler's Germany and for Nazism and fascism. And basically there was like a substantial faction in the US that was very pro-fascist and very pro-Germany and pro-Hitler. And it included people like in government, it included some like very high up people, and that this is something that not a lot of people were taking seriously, that like people in that time were like, they had heard like rumors about it, they knew about these like, you know, like fanatic groups that were developing, but like it's not that big of a deal, they're not serious, like don't worry about it. And thankfully there were some people who did worry about it and who did something about it, and that is what Rachel Maddow was looking at in this book. This is a book that I think, as I said, is very important for our current political climate, and I also think it's a really important one to read right now. Like I'm really glad I read it when I did, because I think it looks very honestly at how bad things can get, how bad things have gotten or are getting, but it also looks very honestly at the fact that there are people, and there were people, who did something about it, and that we can too. So this book is not downplaying the problem, like the current problem of modern fascism in America, but it's saying like, we've beaten it before, and here's how it happened, and here's how we can beat it again, which I just really appreciate that perspective, and I thought Rachel Maddow did a fantastic job of like showcasing that in this book. Also, it is incredibly interesting. Like, you know, people sometimes talk about nonfiction like this as like, oh, it reads like almost like a crime thriller in some places, and it's kind of like that. There's also parts that feel almost like a courtroom drama, which is not in any way to cheapen the severity of the things that she's talking about. I just mean that it's written in a way that is incredibly engaging, while also still being very informative, and I love that Rachel Maddow focuses so much on just like ordinary people. Like almost all of the important players who like brought this to light and who stopped it from getting a firmer foothold in the US, a lot of these people were just regular people. Like one of them was, he like worked in advertising, and he was noticing that like these flyers that like his college-age son was getting, that were very like pro-Germany, like specifically pro like Nazi Germany, and like he was noticing like the advertising budget that they must have had, and he's like, that's weird, like how come a foreign government is able to do the kinds of things that they're doing? And so that's how he ended up getting pulled into it, and it's very interesting, and again, it is very encouraging in a way to see that a lot of people were taking this seriously, and it's important to take it seriously. So yeah, I highly, highly recommend this, especially if you're American, and I would also recommend this like regardless of the kind of nonfiction you normally pick up. Like I really think it's something that a lot of people could get something out of. Yeah, I thought this was fantastic, and I'm glad that we are finally like learning about this, and that like these kinds of stories are being talked about more, because a lot of the stuff in here, like I knew that the broad strokes of what was happening in the US at that time, but I did not know nearly as much as was in here. So yeah, 5 stars to Prequel. I definitely want to read more by Rachel Maddow. Next, I read Here Are Voices, a powerful retelling of the British Empire through 20 true stories by Radhika Natarajan and Chautayana, illustrated by Alexander Mostov. So this is a nonfiction illustrated picture book, which is a combination of things that you guys know I love. And as you can tell from the title, this one is specifically looking at the British Empire and like that history, the impact of Britain's colonization on the world. But it's telling this story through people from the colonized countries. And I feel like that is such, in a way it seems like an obvious concept, but I don't think I had read a book that had that specific concept before. And so I just thought this was very cool. I loved the execution of the concept. I really enjoyed the layout and like organization and the color and all of that. I thought the variety of people here was fantastic. And specifically, I should mention that the figures they talk about, it focuses a lot on like activists and revolutionaries and like people who fought back against the empire. So I love that this book is out there, and I think that it is a really important element of learning about the history of empire, to learn about the people who experienced it, like who were the colonized, you know. I just think that's very important, and yeah, I feel like I'm repeating myself. So 5 stars. This was also excellent. Next, I finished The Warden by Anthony Trollope. This is a pretty short book, and it is the first in his Barchester series, which I've heard you can pretty much read as standalones, but also that there is some crossover that you can enjoy if you do read them in order. So this is the first one, and we are following I'm gonna get like a lot of the terminology wrong here, but we are following, like, the Warden, of course, as our main character. His name is Mr. Harding, and he's a good man. He's, like, a really good person. He is, I forget what his exact position in the church is, but, like, he's got this position that is is like a very comfortable life for himself and his daughter. And it involves being the like official head of a charity, but he really doesn't have to do a ton of administration stuff. He just enjoys like interacting with the people who live there, and he has a good life. And then this young man, John Bold, ends up showing up and deciding that they need to reform this, and that the original will leaving the money to this organization did not intend for the administration to be set up this way. And so there's a lot of like personal politics, church politics. I don't know, like I had a mixed experience with this book, which is pretty much what I've had so far with Anthony Trollope's books that I've read. There were some parts I really liked. I thought his writing is great. I really loved a lot of the humor. I think he's great at like drawing characters in very quick, detailed ways, and in ways that are like vivid but not caricatures a lot of times. Like I just think that's very impressive. And I think the kind of moral and ethical ideas of this book are interesting, but I am really baffled by what the like ultimate message is here. Like, I don't know. I found aspects of this very frustrating because I feel like the book is trying to say something, and I just don't feel like that was super clear. And then also just some aspects of the plot I found annoying personally. And also something else that, again, baffles me is I just genuinely don't know how much of the things that Trollope says is, like, or the narration, I should say, says, is, like, intended to be commentary, and that these are not things that the book is actually endorsing versus how much is. Because, like, there's some, like, I don't know, some of the casual misogyny, it's written in a way where I'm like, this could be commentary, but also maybe the point is actually that we're supposed to think these women are stupid, that kind of thing. I understand that the messiness of the question and the answer and like what is the right thing to do in this case, I understand that that is part of the point, but where I struggled is with how that translates to the story and to the characters and to kind of ultimately where things land with the story. Because I think there are ways to highlight that there's no easy answer to something while also not making it a frustrating reading experience. Whereas with this book, I felt like it was a frustrating reading experience. So I think I give this like 3.5 stars. But maybe it's more like a 3. I don't know. I'm conflicted, but I read it. Next, I finished On Palestine by Noam Chomsky and Ilan Pappé. This is a very short nonfiction that is, of course, by two of the, like, I would say most prominent critics of Israel and activists on behalf of Palestine, who, again, are very well known. This is, like, written as a conversation between these two men, and I thought that was a very interesting way to go about it. The editor, who I guess kind of put that together, is Frank Barat, and this is another one that I did listen to on audio, but what I would do is that I would listen to part of it on audio, and then I would go back and kind of read over some of the sections to really just like absorb the information, and the narrator was George Newbern. So I thought this was really, really excellent nonfiction. It goes over a lot of the like what got us to this point. So there's of course a lot of the history of the region, but also a lot of like history of activism almost, where it talks about like the different solutions favored by activists throughout the years. And something I think is really interesting is that the two authors don't always agree 100% on every point. Like their big ideas are of course the same, and they have a lot of common ground, a lot of like ideas and information that they talk about, and a lot of like points that are in common, but sometimes they do have differing opinions on what the best answer to an issue is, or like how something like a specific event should be like talked about in a certain way. Like, and I thought that was very interesting that like we see that there is still a diversity of perspectives here, and even though the book is set up like a conversation, the information and the knowledge and the analysis is still very deep and very well explained, of course, which makes sense because these are experts in their field. I found this really helpful, really informative, and I also think the book did a really excellent job of balancing the sort of broad strokes of this topic and of different like issues and solutions and events that they talk about, while also being very detailed and specific. And yeah, 5 stars. I thought this was really excellent. I would definitely recommend. Next, I finished Junipers Christmas by Owen Colfer. This book is one that I finished like I read right around Christmas time, of course. And there are some really lovely illustrations. Who is the illustrator? Chaya Prabhat, it looks like. Let me see if I can show you. So I really liked that. Yeah, so this is, we're following our main character Juniper, who her mother goes missing, and she ends up, Juniper ends up like going after her, trying to find her, and she ends up enlisting the help of this like grumpy old man who like lives in the park near the park that Juniper and her mother sort of like manage, or like they're rangers there. And this is a story that has like Santa as a character, which is not usually my thing, but I love Owen Colfer, so I thought I would try this one. And yeah, so most of the book is about Juniper trying to get this man Nico to help her, but he doesn't want to because he's given up doing all of that. Like, he has some things in his past that made him just very disillusioned with like helping people in general and like kids and everything. And yeah, this was middle of the road for me, which is a bummer, but it was like a nice enough thing to read around the Christmas season. I enjoy Owen Colfer's style of writing, so that was still good here. I did like Juniper as the main character. I think like one of the biggest things is I just really didn't care for the plot of this one. Like, I was really uninterested, and I liked Juniper's mother, so I wanted Juniper to like get her mom back, but I just found like the adventuring, all the stuff up to that point, I just didn't find very interesting. Also, like I said, I'm not really somebody who's drawn to stories where like Santa is a character, or I'm very particular with them. Also, there was some like side character sort of like backstory and relationships that again, I just wasn't very interested in. There's like a romantic subplot that definitely doesn't take over the story, but I just didn't care for it that much. I didn't really like the antagonist. Like, I just found them kind of annoying. And I think part of it could be that this particular brand or flavor of whimsy just isn't my favorite. So even an author I enjoy isn't necessarily going to make me like love this plot or this story. Yeah, I think that was part of it. And like, I like the ideas here. Like, some of the messages of this book I think are really important. Like, I'm sure a lot of people would be bothered by how like heavy-handed some of it is, and it definitely is, but like I really like the underlying ideas here. I just wish that the story on top of it were more interesting to me personally. Just like lots of traveling and lots of like having the same kind of like arguments, lots of supporting characters that I like. Some of them I did like, but I didn't like their function in the story as much. I don't know. 3 stars. It was fine. And then finally, the last book I finished in 2023, I think I actually finished this on New Year's Eve, maybe. Into the Spotlight by Carrie Hope Fletcher. I finally read this, Bekka. Bekka from the Book Sanctum is the one who put this on my 12 books, 12 friends list, and I finally finished it. And, oh, I have a bookmark still in here. And I really enjoyed it. So we are following 3 kids, Marigold, Mabel, and Morris. They're adopted siblings, and they live with, they're kind of like found family in this old theater, and they love it here. They love each other. They love like their brilliant Aunt Maud, who's their like primary kind of caretaker or guardian, and they love living at the theater. But it seems like things are getting kind of hard financially for the theater, and the kids are afraid that it's going to be shut down, and so they decide that they're going to have to put on a really amazing show to like bring in the money and to kind of remind people of how wonderful this theater is. And what they end up the show that they end up like wanting to do is one that is based on the journals that one of them finds. I don't want to get into too much detail in case that's a spoiler, but this is sort of like loosely based around the story of ballet shoes. And one thing that I really liked about this book is I always feel like in books that are kind of like not quite retellings but sort of like callbacks to an original story, a lot of times it will kind of like bother me, or like I keep getting distracted by wondering like, okay, so does that book exist in this world or not? Like, how would you not notice that your life is essentially like Pride and Prejudice, for example? And I feel like the way that this book handled that was really good. I really liked that. I really liked the 3 kids. I liked the theater setting. I really loved the like found family element, just like family of a lot of different kinds. I thought that was very cool. This is just like a really cozy, lovely, heartwarming story. And I also really loved how all 3 children have these very different interests and different like gifts and skills and passions. And not only do the characters like treat them as equally important, which of course they should, but like the story itself, I feel like also does a good job of not like highlighting one at the expense of the others, because I feel like that can sometimes happen. I just found this a really lovely, charming, heartwarming story. Like, there were parts near the ending that like were a little bit over the top or cheesy, but like I didn't mind. This is the kind of like the whimsy or cheesiness that I can really enjoy. So yeah, I had a great time. I gave Into the Spotlight 4 stars. Thank you, Bekka, for recommending it, and it was a really lovely book to end the year on, actually. Okay, everybody, so those were the rest of the books I read in December. Please comment down below, let me know if you have read any of these or if you're interested in them. I feel like I had quite the variety, and actually a lot of nonfiction. I ended up being really in a nonfiction kind of headspace for the last month of the year, which I think is interesting. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!